on, it is June. We're here to do the mid-year freakout tag. I am as surprised as you are. This year has flown by, but it's also been a really good year for me. And good reading year as well. Like good year personally, good reading year. I'm happy with 2023 and I had a good feeling about it. So let's do the tag, shall we? The first question is, what is the best book that you've read so far in 2023? And for me, that is The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai. This is a dual timeline story. We follow a group of men, gay men in the 80s who are dealing with AIDS and also the backlash of the world, essentially. And we follow this group of friends as they mourn each other's passing and also are rooting for one another. And then we flash forwards to present day where we meet a woman trying to find her daughter who has gone missing. Her daughter moved to France and ended up essentially becoming part of a cult, and she can't find her daughter anymore and she's terrified. So we follow her, and then these storylines kind of merge together. This woman's brother was a part of this group in the 80s and did pass away. And so these two storylines kind of merge together, and in the most beautiful way. This is absolutely sad. It is also quite funny at times, and I just loved every second. I cared so deeply about Yale, our main character in the 80s. I just was rooting for him the entire time, and nervous about what was going to happen to him. Like it felt like he was a real character. Question number 2, what was the best sequel that you've read thus far in 2023? And for me, that has to be The Story of a New Name by Elena Ferrante. This is the second book in the Neapolitan series. Oh dear. This follows two girls in the 60s living in Italy, specifically living in Naples, and they are incredibly competitive with one another. If you're hearing stuff in the background, that is my dog chewing on a bone. They're competitive with one another, like straight from the get-go, like very competitive in terms of school. They're competitive with like relationships and what have you. So in the second book, you kind of see them moving from childhood and teenagehood into, you know, moving on to furthering their education and also getting a career and that kind of thing. There's so much drama in this series. It is wildly dramatic, but also addictive, and no character is particularly great. I was annoyed by both of the girls, the two main characters. I found them both very frustrating throughout the whole thing. And yet, it's like you can't tear yourself away from this series. I'm so glad that I read it. Question number 3, what is a new release that you want to read but you have not read yet? For me, that has to be The Mitford Affair. I bought this one, I think back in January or February, and yet I still haven't read it. This is about the Mitford sisters. There were 5 or 6 of them. 6. 2 of them are very well known. One was an author, and the other became quite engaged and quite chummy with the Nazis. And so you follow these sisters dealing with one another, having very different viewpoints on the world, loving each other, but also trying to create some boundaries within one another. It just sounds so interesting. And I really like Marie Benedict. I've read The Mystery of Mrs. Christie by her. She tends to take real life stories and then fictionalize them. So she did Agatha Christie in that last book, and then now we're doing the Mitfords, and I have a couple more on my shelves by her. I think there's one that's about Winston Churchill's wife. Anyway, I want to read this, and I will. Question number 4 is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? And this book, Do Tell by Lindsay Lynch, is a debut novel. I have like hair, like a fuzz or something on the side of my... It is a debut novel by this woman. And I'm going to read this blurb and you tell me if that doesn't sound like the best book in the entire world. Also blurbed by Anne Patchett, who I love. So, okay, I'm going to read it to you. I've got my trusty laptop here. As a character actress, Eddie O'Dare finishes the final year of her contract with FWM Studios. The clock is ticking for her to find a new gig after an undistinguished stint in the pictures. She's long supplemented her income moonlighting for Hollywood's reigning gossip columnist, providing her with the salacious details of every party and premiere. When an up-and-coming starlet hands her a letter alleging an assault from an A-list actor at a party with Edie and the rest of the industry's biggest names in attendance, Edie helps get the story into print and sets up a chain of events that will alter the trajectories of everyone involved. Now, on a new side of the entertainment business, Edie's second act career grants her more control on the page than she ever commanded in front of the camera. But Edie quickly learns that publishing the secrets of those former colleagues she considers friends has repercussions. And when she finds herself in the middle of the trial of the decade, Edie is forced to make an impossible choice with the potential to ruin more than one life. Yes, I need to read that. That is the book that I'm most excited for. Question number 5. What was your biggest disappointment of the year? So far, it's been The Overnight Guest by Heather Goodenkoff. This book follows a woman, I think she's an author of true crime, and she's writing her story. She's like kind of gotten away from her family for a little bit. She has a teenage son that she's having a hard time with. And she's like, I'm going to get away and write this book. And so she does. It's the middle of winter. And in the middle of a huge snowstorm, there is a child that she finds in the middle of the snow. And she takes this child in. And it goes from there. This definitely is a thriller. It doesn't sound like a thriller as I'm saying it, but it is a thriller. I just found like some of the twists and turns were so painfully obvious, and some of them were so just painful. Some of them I was like, I hope they're not doing that. Like, I hope they're not going there. And then they went there and I was just like, why are you ruining everything? I felt extremely disappointed. Question number 6. What was the biggest surprise of the year? Frida McFadden. This is The Housemaid. I've been hearing all sorts of things. I feel like a lot of people must have Kindle Unlimited because I think this is on there. So people are they're really on the Frida McFadden bandwagon. This is my first book that I've read by her, and I've only read this one, but I enjoyed it. It wasn't perfect, but like I definitely will read more by her. It's like a popcorn thriller kind of. So The Housemaid is about a housemaid who is taking care of this beautiful estate for the Winchesters. She finds the lady of the house to be very suspect. It seems like the lady of the house, who I'm forgetting her name, keeps doing things to make her life harder, and she's wondering what is going on. She has a daughter who is extremely annoying to her. And then the husband is just nice, and it seems like Nina, the woman of the home, is just cruel to him constantly. And of course there are twists and turns. Our main character lives in the attic. This house is gorgeous, and yet she's in an attic in this kind of shabby room, and there's a lock on the door, but it locks from the outside. And so there's lots of secrets in this house, and I really did enjoy it. I was flipping the pages. It was one of those things where you buy it, like you order it one day and then it comes the next day and you pick it up pretty much straight away. That's what happened here, and it was enjoyable for me. Question number 7. What is your favorite new author? It can be a debut or a new to you. And I will say that, like, I find it hard to say if an author is going to be a favorite by just reading one book. So in this case, I've read 2 of his books and loved them both. And so now I feel like I can say I will be reading everything that he writes. This is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. I read No Exit with him. We actually read that from my book club when I used to have a Patreon. This was fantastic. Like, I think this should be the thriller of the summer. It was so fun to read. This follows a woman, Emma. She lives in isolation with her golden retriever, who she like kind of talks for. Like, when she looks at her golden retriever, she imagines what the retriever says. And I think we all do that. I also add like a strange accent to Winnie's inner dialogue. Anyway, so she's very isolated, and that's what she wants. She's had a lot gone on in her life, and she needs this time alone. She's really not around anyone. She is in contact via like email and text, I think, with the landlord. And also she knows she's kind of in contact with her neighbor who lives around the lake, basically. But that's it. One day she's read a horror novel and hated it, like genuinely despised it. And so she writes a review, a scathing review, and the author writes back and is not very nice back. And they have this like basically online fight. And then after that is done, like the next day, things start happening to her. And she believes that it is this horror author like coming to get her for the bad review, which is hilarious and outlandish and ridiculous. This whole book, I was smiling and laughing my way through. I love it when people write thrillers and horrors that can have creepy moments, which this did, but also are just having fun with it. Like Grady Hendrix does that, and I feel like so does Taylor Adams. Just loved it so much. Really, really did. Question number 8, newest fictional crush. I don't do crushes. Question number 9, newest favorite character. And speaking of Grady Hendrix, this new favorite character of mine is Mark from How to Sell a Haunted House. So this book follows a woman who's going back home after her parents have suddenly died. They have suddenly died together in an accident, and she's going home to like sort through their belongings and do the funeral and all of those things, go through the house. And she realizes, God, I have to talk to my estranged brother Mark, who just is a kind of screw up. Like, he screws everything up, and her parents have like forgiven him and taken care of him. And she's like, why does he get to get away with absolute insanity and I can't do anything? So it's got this really interesting dynamic between these two. And of course they go to this home, and their parents were really involved with like in the puppetry community, and her mom made all of these puppets, and they're everywhere, and they are creepy as hell. Okay, this is a book if you are scared of like dolls and puppets and those kinds of things, and you want to be scared, read this book 100%. I don't find them very scary, so I just loved the ride the entire time. I love the dynamics between the sister and brother. I found him extremely annoying at the beginning because you're learning about him from her perspective, and she really doesn't like him. But then as you go on and you get to know him more, I loved both of them. Okay, I ended up loving both of them so much. Question number 10, a book that made you cry. 100% The Great Believers by Rebecca Mackay. I mentioned it earlier. Winnie is now like rubbing herself on the carpet. Sorry about the noise. But yeah, if you read this book and don't cry, I don't know. I will say I'm also on a new antidepressant that allows me to cry, which is a wonderful thing. You release so much when you cry. I can't believe I went for like, I don't know, 3 years without really not crying a ton. Anyway, I cried reading this book. Okay, and this question, I feel like it's gonna say a lot, maybe about me. Question number 11, a book that made you happy. Yeah, The Paying Guests by Sarah Waters. This is about a mother and a daughter, an adult daughter, they've lost their entire family. Like, I think she had two brothers in the war. They both died. They've recently lost the husband and father. And so they have this enormous house and they cannot afford it. And so they decide to take on paying guests, basically people who will stay with them on the top floor. So when a young couple, Lillian and Leonard, move in, our main character, Frances, who is the daughter, the adult daughter, becomes friends with them. There is romance in this book and I didn't mind it. Sometimes I did, I will say. There were moments where I did find it frustrating because I don't have a heart. But there is a sudden shift when someone is injured suddenly in this book. And it changes the entire trajectory of the book halfway through. The first half is a bit of a love story and then it shifts. And I was here for all of it. I could not stop reading. I cared so much about the characters. I wanted everybody to do well. And so it made me happy, even though not everyone is happy. But do you know what is that? There's a German word about when you are, you take joy in someone else's failings, basically. There's a character in here that you just hate the whole time. And yeah, sometimes you're happy to hate them. Okay, moving on. So the next question is like, what is the most beautiful book that you've bought this year? I was looking at my shelves and I was like, I don't really have a book that I would consider super beautiful. So sorry about that. Last is, what books are you really wanting to prioritize this year? And I have basically any book that is new. Like, I have this desire to read tons of new books this year. So for example, The Mitford Affair, I really want to finish. It's a 2023 release. So I'd like to read that. And then I have two books that are coming a little later on in June. I have the new Riley Sager I want to read. And then the new Ruth Ware as well. So basically anything new I want to get to this year. So those are all of the books that I wanted to share with you in this little tag. Can't believe it's halfway through the year already. Wild. I will talk with you very soon. Bye, guys.